Hi, I'm Alicia Amerson, and the capstone that I'm going to present to you today is an international study on whale watching along the Pacific coast following the gray whale migration. And so I know we're a little tired after lunch here, so I'm going to have you be a little interactive for a moment. And just raise your hand if you can remember the first time that you saw a whale on a whale watching boat. And I want to bring you back to that really exhilarating moment of that first experience, because for me, this project included a lot of first, even kissing a baby gray whale. So the project began with three major objectives. First, I established how regional best practices of whale watching were applied by operators along the Pacific coast. I followed the gray whale migration, taking notes along the way, looking at the different regulations and guidelines from the Baja Peninsula in Mexico along the US coast and all the way to the cold waters of Canada's British Columbia. Second, I distributed an online survey to determine how operators view the importance of guidelines in their area. And then third, and most important, I determined the level of receptivity of regional and international endorsement programs from the whale watching businesses. So baleen whales use very long plates to skim and strain small fish, krill, and crustaceans from the water. Baleen whales migrate very long distances between their foraging area and their reproductive area, so it makes it very difficult to study the impacts of whale watching along this journey. This is the first study to actually follow baleen whales aboard whale watching vessels. So I made notes regarding the guidelines and/or regulations in each area and found some interesting patterns in my data. So I'll cut to the chase and show you what I found. As an anonymous tourist, I collected data aboard 6 Canadian vessels, 25 US vessels, and 12 Mexican vessels. And within the lagoons in Baja de California, Mexico, whale watching is firmly self-regulated by the operators and by the whale watching companies. And within these lagoons, the regulations are actively enforced. Whereas in the US and Canada, there are general guidelines, but they're not enforced for baleen whales. Within the Baja lagoons, there are specific areas designated to whale watching, which you can see here. And this is where the boat traffic can actually go, where the rest of the lagoon is completely closed off to all boat traffic. And this conservation measure actually allows the whale to decide whether or not it wants to be whale watched. In the US and Canada, there are no specific areas set aside for whale watching, and one can run a whale watching business virtually from any coast. In the Baja lagoons, operators must obtain permits and they must join self-regulated programs. A limited number of pangas are allowed in the whale watching area at one time. So the operators are witnessing each other's actions, as you can see here, which helps to reinforce their regulations. And pangas are these small boats that are launched from the beach. The Baja lagoons lie within the second largest biosphere in the world, El Visicano. And the Mexican government enacted the first whale sanctuary within this biosphere reserve, which was San Ignacio Lagoon. There are many marine protection areas along the coast of the US and Canada, but none of them include whale watching. So the next thing I wanted to look at is the importance of guidelines. And so I asked whale watching business along Canada and the US about what they saw as most important, and I received 50 responses back from my online surveys. So I didn't have trouble getting responses. These are the basic set of guidelines and their responses. And the two that I saw most towards the top that were kind of ethical and very hard to monitor in the field was avoiding disturbing natural behavior and do not evoke reaction from a whale. And something that is more of a direct action would be easy to monitor for compliance, and I thought maybe something like staying 100 yards away or viewing time of 30 minutes is much more easy to view for compliance measurements. And these ranked a little bit lower. One direct action that I saw happen in the field quite often was boats that wanted to comply with avoiding radical speed and directional changes while approaching, viewing, and leaving the whale. And not only did I see this happen in the field, they also ranked pretty high on the guidelines for importance. All but one of these guidelines received a 1 on 1 or more survey, except for viewing time of 30 minutes or less. And although it never received a 1, 43% of the survey operators marked this guideline as a 3, so ranking in importance. So in Mexico, whales approach boats, and I refer to this as an encounter. So an encounter is when the whale approaches a boat and there's direct human contact. And in the US, I refer to in Canada, I refer to pursuits of whales. So this is where the whale-watching boat is watching from a distance and follows a whale for a non-specific amount of time. So twice in Mexico, we had no encounters, although we saw plenty of whales in the lagoons. 8 times we had 1 encounter, and all tours within the lagoons are 90 minutes long. And it's really their choice, the whale's choice, if it comes to the ponga to interact with humans. Operators provide 3 tours per day, and the reserve is open from 8 to 6 p.m. In the US, I graphed all pursuits in US and Canada. I wanted to look at dolphins, orcas, and harbor porpoise, and most of the time, whale-watching companies want to show tourists some type of cetacean, so that's why I recorded every pursuit. And this chart shows the number of pursuits per whale-watching tour. 7 of the 24 times, there were 3 pursuits in one whale-watching tour, and this shows that 2 to 3 pursuits might be expected within the 2 to 5 hour tours that were provided by operators. Operators also provide more than 1 tour per day, typically, and they have multiple boats in their fleet offering multiple tours. Operators do not have to obtain a whale-watching permit, and there's no regulation on how many pursuits they can have during a tour. While on board the US and Canadian boats, I also timed each pursuit to see if the whale-watching operators abided by the 30-minute or less guideline. And this is what I found. My graphs are focused strictly on baleen whales here, so I did not include Odonocete whale species. In a 2 to 4 hour tour, when a whale is found during the first pursuit, 60% of the time, the operator will stay with that whale more than 30 minutes. And I found that this leaves less time for additional pursuits, and my data shows that additional pursuits 2, 3, 4, and 5 were actually 80 to 100% less than 30 minutes. There was one longer trip, oops, let's see here. Gonna work? Okay, there was one longer trip in Monterey Bay where on pursuit 1 we saw 10 to 12 foraging humpbacks in the bay, and we stayed, the first pursuit we stayed longer than 30 minutes. We found 4 other types of cetaceans on other pursuits, and we came back to this group outside of the dock and stayed for 90 minutes on the 6th pursuit, watching this with about 4 or 5 other boats just circling these guys. So the next thing I wanted to look at is the willingness for operators to join endorsement programs. And an endorsement program is a voluntary education and recognition program offered to commercial whale watching. It's a way that collaboration can be developed between regulators, industry, and scientists. It's a way to recognize commitment to responsible and sustainable whale watching practices in specific regions. And so out of the 50 surveys that I received back from the operators, 30 of them said yes to some form of endorsement. 11 said they already belonged to an established organization, and 15 wanted more information. Only 3 of these 50 surveys said no, that they were not interested. So then comes to the question, if you're a whale watcher, how do you get the most for your money? And so I recorded the 3 types of services provided on watching boats: safety, education, and entertainment. And education could be in the type of any type of whale paraphernalia, so bones, books, posters, baleen, and even the presence of a certified naturalist. And what I found is that when an operator offers safety, they typically offer some sort of education. 5 of the 27 operators did not provide safety, and 6 did not provide education. And 2 of the boats didn't even talk to us at all. And not all the businesses have a certified naturalist working with them. And so of the 21 boats that offered education, only 68% of those boats had an onboard naturalist. And from an economic perspective, the tourist wants the most for their money. And from a conservation viewpoint, there are 13 million people who whale watch around the world on an annual basis. And each one of those 13 million tourists would benefit from knowing more about the ocean and about the animals they're going to see. So there's large economic differences between the communities along the Pacific coast. And so here in California, we have a large tourist base, and we have beautiful weather and high biodiversity of whales, so whale watching operators can provide annual tours. Whereas in Depot Bay and Newport, Oregon, the economic reality is much different than the California coast. And without whales in Depot Bay especially, there's really not much of an economy, and they brag about how small they really are there. There are 2 whale watching hotspots on Vancouver Island in Canada. Victoria is known for whale watching focused on orca whales. But there are few humpbacks that are migrating into these waters nowadays after the populations were completely depleted due to commercial whaling. So Tofino is one of these small little villages located on the west coast of Vancouver Island. And here in Tofino, they focus on whale watching, bear watching, and surfing, and fishing. And the gray whales migrate up into these coves along Vancouver Island, and they forage on arthropods. And this makes it really easy for the whale watching operators to find the whales day by day. And in Mexico, whales are only around from January to April, and regulations only allow whale watching to happen within the lagoons from February to April. And there's no other significant businesses along the shoreline of the lagoon except for the artisanal fishermen. So just as I found differences in the communities, I found great differences in the whale watching operators themselves. Boats of all sizes provide experience. So we have the Bill of Rights tall ship that Joanna talked to us about. We have small fast rafts. We have large cruise ships. We have commercial fishermen offering whale watching during their off-season. Businesses range from commercial to nonprofits, which also varies by region. This tells us that creating standards that will meet the current practices and needs of such disparate operators will be difficult. So to summarize my results, I propose the following 4 ideas to improve responsible and sustainable whale watching practices on the Pacific coast. First, creating a naturalist program that would ensure knowledge is delivered to tourists is accurate and up to date. Second, we know whale watching companies are demonstrating that they're willing to cooperate with a set of guidelines as long as it does not impact their business, which was noted by multiple operators I interviewed. And the majority of those people just don't have the time to create guidelines, so someone needs to do it for them and with them. And we all really care about the whales for one reason or another. And the whale watching operators definitely know that the health of their businesses depend entirely on the health of the whale populations. So my proposal is for the marine biologists to develop conservation-based guidelines with operator experience and knowledge. And then these new guidelines can be adopted into established regional endorsement programs. In a situation where guidelines can be easily pushed aside in our government, a literal network of whale watching operators could be a powerful force. So through their eyes can obviously refer to the whales themselves, but it also can refer to the perceptions the whale watching operators have, and it can refer to what we the marine scientists see as being needed. And I want to recognize and thank each one of my advisory committee, Jay Barlow, John Hildebrandt, Ryan Wiff, and Jeff Pentukoff. And they've supported me each step of the way, and at multiple conferences, they've supported this project and introduced me to a wide range of individuals within this industry. And I want to thank the outside collaboration who discussed their different views of whale watching to help me build a comprehensive view of this industry. And I want to thank my project funders, which is the Wellman Foundation, American Cetacean Society, San Diego Chapter, and all who contributed on the Indiegogo campaign. Thank you to the CNBC program and Scripps Institution of Oceanography and all the professors and administrators who got us through this one really intense year. Are there any questions?
We have time for questions. Let's wait for the microphone.
I think Elizabeth and I both would like to know why you think you got such a strong survey response, and if you could share that with us.
I got a strong survey response. I used Facebook and I used Twitter for social media platforms. I reached out via handwritten letters by mail to ask them, to tell them that I was going to ask for their support. And then I created my survey, and I used a SurveyMonkey, and I had the application on my iPhone. And so when I went aboard the vessels, after I completed a tour and got my data, I asked for their participation in the survey, and all of them actually said yes. And so I think it was just the process of getting them to know the project through those different channels. Thank you.
Hi, thank you very much. That was really great, and it's yeah, I've been whale watching in San Ignacio Lagoon, and I do know that a lot of people as far as La Paz do go there to watch whales, and I do think it would be make people feel really good if they knew that they were endorsed, their trips, you know, the tour operators were endorsed somehow, especially because it's such an informal seeming organization of the panga operators. How do you envision those operators being able to tell people that they are certified? Because a lot of the time they just pick you up on the beach, or at least maybe it's different. In La Paz, they also do things like looking at whale sharks, and I was thinking about applying this also to whale sharks. But do the panga operators have a means of saying, hey, we're certified, we're endorsed, in an easy way?
Well, I think the panga operators that are within the Biosphere Reserve, actually, to be a part of the Biosphere Reserve, that delegated name, one of the things they have to do is be self-endorsed, where Magdalena Bay, there's also the gray whales in that lagoon, and I don't know for sure if those operators are endorsed. The Whale Sense program that was implemented on the east coast of the U.S., it's a voluntary program for U.S. whale watching operators, and so they actually have to meet some standards before they get endorsed, and it's kind of like a Yelp saying, hey, we're endorsed, and we do these following things. But the endorsement programs that are in San Ignacio and Ojo de Libre, they are mandatory, set by the federal government, that they have to work together. So basically the federal government has a set of rules, and then the operators come together to actually say how they're going to implement the rules. Like in San Ignacio, they have to have a certain number of pangas, or there's only a certain number of pangas allowed, and then they decide that it was 16 in San Ignacio. So if there was 16 in the lagoon, no more could go in until somebody else left. So.
Okay, let's say thanks to Alicia.